Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Worldwide Battle Royale. If you didn't see the last episode, then, you can see what the map looks like. A lot of stuff happened. I can't remember exactly what happened, but basically the world consolidated into 4 alliances, and now the red and yellow alliances are going to go up against the purple and green alliances in an ultimate showdown. How does that ultimate showdown start? Well, it starts when the US is just getting tired of waiting and decides that they're going to invade Venezuela. They're just going to prod the Yellow Alliance and see what happens. And the Yellow Alliance is not going to just sit this and let them take Venezuela. And so they're going to start sending aid to Venezuela. But for now, that's all they're going to do, and it's not going to be able to stop the Green Alliance, which is mostly the US, but Argentina is helping a little bit, from taking parts of Venezuela. Mostly the Amazonian parts that don't really have people living there, because it's a lot harder to invade places that have people living there. And so those are the places that are actually being defended. But the U.S. needs to take those places before they can take the actual places, because the Yellow Alliance's Navy is actually doing much better. They will also invade U.S. holdings in Brittany, and so the U.S. has to reinforce those holdings. And the U.S. obviously takes this as an invasion by the Yellow Alliance and declares war on the entire Yellow Alliance, not just Paris and Spain, who are actually doing the invasion, but the entire alliance. There's a major naval battle going on here, which is preventing the U.S. from landing until they win it, and they're probably going to win it, but it's going to take a little while. And it's going to be hard for them to supply Paris or Brittany before it falls, so they kind of let Brittany fall and hope to take it back later. And Brittany's not its own country, it's part of the U.S., but whatever. So the U.S. is going to invade into Canada, since that's really the only avenue they can take that is really effective. So they invade into here, and they're doing pretty well. They take most of Canada's population, but Canada doesn't sue for peace or surrender. They keep fighting. But the U.S. has very much strengthened their border, so it's really hard for Canada to get anything done. They do invade into the tail part of Alaska that no one really lives here, and it wasn't really defended. They put their defenses here. Because they knew that this part is just not worth defending, and it's easier to defend here anyway. So Canada's able to take that. But besides that, it's just a bunch of failed defenses into U.S. territory. While the U.S. is busy actually getting stuff done in a series of massive offensives. They also managed to militarily surround Nova Scotia and take it, which is putting New Brunswick at risk. They also take Prince Edward Island. And they start trying to navally surround Vancouver Island. But they do need most of their navy to be over here, where they have just won the naval battle. And so they're trying to make amphibious invasions of Venezuela. And it's going pretty well for them. And it's at this point that the Yellow Alliance is the Yellow Alliance is asking the Red Alliance where they are, because they were supposed to be allies in this war, and the Red Alliance has done absolutely nothing to help them. The Red Alliance basically says, we are aligned with you, but we haven't been attacked, and as long as we haven't been attacked, we're just going to stay out of this. We think that you guys are going to be fine. Really, the Red Alliance just wants to wait for the Yellow Alliance to be weaker, so that they can guarantee that if they win the war, they end up being the stronger of the two factions. And if the Yellow Alliance just completely gets destroyed, then they don't have to fight in the war at all. The Yellow Alliance is pretty much entirely in the Eastern Hemisphere, though, and so they can't really help out the Americas, and they think Russia might be able to because of the Bering Strait. And so they're kind of mad about this, but they obviously don't attack their allies. Instead, what they do is they just keep fighting. So this part of Venezuela is the most defended area, and they managed to actually make another landing in Brazil, because the U.S.'s Navy is busy invading Canada, and they just took New Brunswick, so they're not doing badly at it. And now 75 or 80% of Canada's population is under rule, as they also just took Vancouver Island. Another thing the Yellow Alliance does to try and prod the U.S. into caring more about this war is they basically set up a new government in Brittany and finally reunite France into one country by reuniting Paris and Brittany. And this is very much not good for the US, because even if they win the war, they're going to have to re-annex Brittany and go through the work of annexing it all over again, which is annoying for them. And it makes the US mad. And they kind of do a stupid They try sending troops directly to retake Brittany, and they get shot down around the Azores, which are like right here. A lot of their ships get shot down, and they have like no place to park because all of the islands here are controlled by the Yellow Alliance. So they basically decide they're not going to try that again, and they pull the ships that remain back. But the U.S. Navy did just lose a little bit, which allows for another landing to be made here by the Yellow Alliance. And all of a sudden, the Yellow Alliance actually has a chance. Remember, the U.S. Army also exists, and it's very strong. And they start making a push out of Alaska, retaking the territory that Canada's taken, and starting to take a lot of the Canadian territories that Canada itself doesn't even care about. But the U.S. knows it's very strategic because of the fact that it's the North Pole and the Arctic Circle. And once Vancouver has fallen, pretty much all of Canada's population is now under U.S. occupation, but Canada still refuses to surrender because they think if they surrender, that'll be worse if the Yellow Alliance wins, and if they don't surrender, they're probably going to be annexed anyway. Newfoundland is taken, and Labrador, as well as the rest of Quebec, are being besieged by the U.S. Navy as the Hudson Bay is finally reached. With the North Pole accessed, I guess they already had access via Alaska, a landing will be made in Svalbard, and the U.S. successfully takes Svalbard, and then attacks Norway, landing in the northernmost parts of Norway. And it's at this point that the Red Alliance realizes they kind of have to at least start helping, and so they start sending some troops to help the Yellow Alliance fight in Norway, and that is helping them, but not enough because the U.S. makes another landing. This time they land in Greenland, in the north of Greenland, and this works very well. They managed to take pretty much the entire northern coast, as well as this Canadian island. I don't know what it's called. And with this, like, they just basically send some forces. If there's people living here specifically, they might not even see U.S. soldiers, but for all practical purposes, Greenland has pretty much fallen by this point, once they take Nuuk, which they have at this point. They then start a naval engagement with Iceland, which they win, and manage to capture the entire island. And now they're starting naval engagements with the United Kingdom, which they're for now not able to break the naval line, but it's getting kind of scary for the Yellow Alliance. With their homeland being threatened, they're withdrawing a lot of the aid they were giving to Venezuela, and this leads to Venezuela finally collapsing. And the U.S. is kind of fearful that these guys are going to try and retake Venezuela, so they speed up the annexation and annex it during the war. This way, Venezuela can't be brought back even if these guys win. For now, the Green Alliance seems to be winning as Canada has all but fallen. And this is like the same thing that happened in Greenland at this point. Like, any settlements that happen to be here might not actually be under U.S. occupation, but for all intents and purposes, Canada is fully taken. And with this, the U.S. basically offers a peace treaty to the Yellow Alliance, saying, hey, we'll just take what we have, we'll even leave Norway except for Svalbard, and you guys can keep existing as an alliance. And the Yellow Alliance will say no to that. The U.S. is very pissed about, and so they're like, fine, you want to fight? We'll fight. And they start sending naval troops, specifically over here to, I believe this is Guinea. If I'm not mistaken, this is Guinea, but I very well could be mistaken. So I'm going to just assume this is Guinea. If it's not, whatever. Spoiler alert, this country's not going to win. They start sending troops to Guinea, and Guinea is not doing well. They basically immediately fold to the invasion while these guys are redirecting troops to this invasion. And the U.S. is like, hey, now do you want to surrender? And the alliance is like, no. And so the U.S. keeps sending troops. Now they start invading into Senegal as well as into Ghana. And they're doing pretty well. Somehow, they've actually been pushed out of Norway. This is because the Red Alliance is actually helping them there. But everywhere else, they're pretty much completely losing. And it's at this point that the tide of the war will get even worse for the Yellow Alliance as the Pink Alliance decides to join in. They first start invading into Oman, as well as into Iran, and things are just going awfully for the Yellow Alliance, as they've completely lost Oman pretty quickly, and the Pink Alliance is taking Iran, who just can't possibly win against the entire Pink Alliance. But then the Pink Alliance, while the US has done even more invading over here, does something really, really catastrophic. While they're invading into Iran, they accidentally invade into Russia. That's a big mistake. And it's not this much. They probably made like this much into Russia, or even less. Like, it's so much you wouldn't actually be able to see, so little you wouldn't actually be able to see it on the map. But Russia is pissed, and so they declare war on the Pink Alliance. So now the Pink Alliance is fighting both of their enemies, but the Green Alliance and the Red Alliance are still technically at peace. The Red Alliance will first push back the Pink Alliance, but they will not actually give the land they've got to Iran, which the Alliance is upset about, but they're not going to do anything about it. They then start an invasion into India from 3 fronts. Or I guess from 2 fronts, but one of them is really long. And the southern front is the one that's going the best, because India was not really defending this territory. They kind of knew it would fall. Omani resistance fighters managed to break the Pink Alliance over here, because now they're worried about a bigger threat. And so they managed to start fighting. And the US is still making gains over here, but the Alliance has managed to slow them. The Pink Alliance, though, has started an invasion of Gabon, so really things are just not going well for the Alliance still. They really need the Red Alliance's help, and right now the Red Alliance is only focused on the Pink Alliance, whereas the US and Argentina, like, to a small extent, are just clobbering them. This naval thing is finally broken, and some of the Scottish Isles are made landings on by the US. And now the US is preparing to invade into Ireland, but there's still some more navy here that they need to get breakthrough for now. India is really not faring well. If there's any hope that the Red Alliance will help out the Yellow Alliance, they need to first take out India. Well, India is not doing well. In fact, they've pretty much all but lost, and they will surrender at this point. So that's a little beam of hope. Iran manages to start pushing these guys back. Oman manages to start pushing these guys back as they're getting help from the Red Alliance. But the Red Alliance is also doing their own thing, and they managed to invade all the way to the Persian Gulf and seize this land that they just don't return to Iran, but Iran doesn't actually fight them on it, which means they're probably going to lose land even if they win the war. The U.S. is finally getting stalled outside of, like, around these borders over here. Their African invasion is getting stalled, so they decide to start funding the Pink Alliance's invasion of Gabon. And the Red Alliance will condemn this and say, you should stop aiding the Pink Alliance or you might be our next target. And the US doesn't, and Russia doesn't actually do anything about it, nor China. However, the US invasion of Ireland has just commenced, and pretty much a week after it commences, it's finished. And this is really scary for the UK. The Isle of Man is taken. The Channel Islands are taken, but you can't actually see that they're taken because they're so tiny. Some more Scottish Islands are taken, and then a landing is made in Scotland, and another landing is made in southern Scotland, and a third landing is made in Wales. And the UK is fighting bravely, but they don't know if they're going to be able to stop this. The Scottish landings merge together, but for now they're keeping England fine, and they actually push out the Welsh invasion and retake the Isle of Man. And this line here is pretty much a stalemate. So the US uses this as an opportunity to reinforce their positions in Scotland. The US also manages to take the Azores. The Canaries are taken, except for these two. And they even make a landing in western Spain that is actually immediately pushed out. So the US isn't, like, completely dominating this war, but it looks like the US is pretty much going to win. They managed to finally break through this front line and start invading into Nigeria. And Nigeria is trying their best to hold on, but with them getting squeezed on all sides, it's not certain how much longer they'll be able to hold this. As for the Russians, though, first of all, Oman has pushed these guys out and is even starting to invade into Yemen, because Yemen's just very weak, and Ethiopia is trying to focus here. So Yemen will actually just surrender. And now Oman is invading into Saudi Arabia. Russia is now invading into Turkey. For like the 20-something time of the series, Bulgaria and Georgia are also helping them. Bulgaria starts sending troops here, and Greece will start sending troops into Turkey as well. Tunisia starts sending troops into Libya, and now it's clear that these two alliances are working together, even if not very well, not as well as the Green and Pink alliances are working together. Ethiopia will try to liberate Yemen, but because Yemen surrendered, it kind of feels like they're invading Yemen. And so Yemen will enter secret talks with the Russian alliance, and they will actually end up switching sides. And they will start pushing back against Ethiopia, and they will even seize Socotra. Access to the Persian Gulf is lost by the Pink Alliance as the Black Sea is fully taken. Cyprus is seized and given to Greece. And the Yellow Alliance will start an invasion of Libya as Nigeria manages to start pushing back the Pink Alliance. The one problem is that the front line in England has just broken and the US is now flooding down, and England had no more lines of defense. So they evacuate as many people, especially soldiers, as possible, but the UK has fully fallen. The last two Canary Islands are taken, and a landing is made in Morocco, which is part of Spain at this point. And this front line decides to just crawl up the coast in through Western Sahara and into Morocco to merge these two front lines. The Pink Alliance is starting to get pushed back as a little encircled group here is freed. And whatever parts of actual Nigeria were taken are now not taken. And basically Nigeria is just doing really well. But they're not doing well enough, per se. So now basically the theme of the war is that the Green Alliance is doing well and the Pink Alliance is not, with one exception, as Australia uses this opportunity to seize Tasmania as well as invading into New Zealand, and Russia's allies don't think this is a valuable enough thing to stop. Indonesia sends a small invasion force into Australia, but Australia manages to hold them right around here, and they don't really care if this land is taken, so they just leave it occupied and just keep the rest defended. A landing is made in Normandy, and they were distracting them, saying they would land here. I wonder where that's from. A landing is made in Normandy by the U.S. as they quickly take Brittany and begin trying to reinstate their colony here. But it's going to be actually legitimately difficult for them to do because the people of Brittany don't want this. Spain keeps them halted at the border, which is impressive. But they are losing land in Africa, so I wouldn't be too impressed with them. And in fact, Mali, which is this country, will surrender, which gives the U.S. plenty of access to keep pushing up into Morocco, as well as to take parts of the Algerian desert that they want. And they're just kind of pushing to take, like, imagine that these are all the important parts of the Algerian desert. Those are the parts they're actually taking. And they start trying to push their way up into actual Algeria and just taking the useless parts along the way as long as they can. Nigeria actually manages to push them out all the way back into Ghana. They also managed to do this with the Pink Alliance. The Pink Alliance is not doing well. Turkey, with a secret invasion plan that the Russians had, they seize Ankara, and with this, Turkey is like very much not doing well. Like pretty much most of their population, I think, has been taken, and they just have like a small area over here left. And the Russians are not going to be kind to Turkey because they fought against Turkey so many times. But eventually they do manage to take whatever's left of Turkey. That being said, the Netherlands are not going to experience any mercy as they get fully clobbered, as the US is now starting to invade into Denmark. With this, Norway is distracted and they accidentally allow another invasion to happen over here. That Russia just seemingly invades into Norway and takes this area. Or I guess it's more Finland doing that. But yeah, that's kind of not okay that they did that, but no one's going to stop them. And the US is going to take the northern parts of Sweden that Sweden isn't really trying to defend, as well as starting to get further down into Norway. Denmark will surrender once Copenhagen is threatened, because they don't want to get Copenhagen attacked again. And Germany is now also planning to surrender, but the US makes an interesting decision here. They invade into Poland. And with this, Russia fully declares war on the US's alliance. China actually doesn't, but for all intents and purposes, they have. Like, it doesn't really matter that they didn't, because the same thing's going to happen as if they did. So, just interesting knowledge. This is going to happen, though. As soon as Russia declares war on the US, Large swaths of Denmark are liberated. Germany is liberated and unsurrenders. The Netherlands are liberated and unsurrender. And Spain has the morale to start invading into France again. The Algerian desert is completely withdrawn from, but this is a U.S. decision. This isn't a reinvasion. The U.S. is actually withdrawing from here, just because they feel like it's not worth keeping this land. It's not valuable enough. Greece makes a landing in Tunisia, or not? Not Tunisia, in Libya. Sorry, I don't know what that was. That made me say that. And now Egypt is starting to get invaded into. Libya will surrender, and now the Pink Alliance is really feeling it. Yemen will now start helping the invasion of Saudi Arabia, which had been stalemated for a while, but now it's finally not stalemated anymore, as Turkey is going to be used as a staging ground for an invasion of Saudi Arabia as the capital is taken. With this, the U.S. realizes that it's only a matter of time unless they do something really big, so they launch a massive campaign into Norway and Sweden, using up a lot of their resources, probably too many of their resources, as they do so. The U.S. launches an invasion across the Bering Strait of Russia, hoping that this will deter Russia and maybe get them to rethink the war. It doesn't, it just angers Russia further, but the U.S. is now going all out. Australia is ordered to finally actually do something about this, so they start invading into Indonesia, and Indonesia is too weak to stop it, as the island of Timor is taken. And pretty much all of these random small islands, Sulawesi is taken. Java is obviously held out on, but even Borneo is made a landing on. The Philippines are kind of liberated because they really didn't want this, and they're even given a new government aligned to the Pink Team, the Pink Alliance. And now Russia finally decides they're going to send troops to help out Indonesia, and so it's around this point that, and China also does that, it's around this point at which Australia's invasion stops, and they actually decide to straight up retreat off of Borneo because it's not a defensible position. But yeah, the Red Alliance just lost a lot. Russia also decides to refocus their things to take back Siberia, and they kind of let the U.S. take this land that they were occupying. Not on purpose, obviously, but Russia is slowly taking back Siberia, but they're putting way too many men for the value they're getting, and they allow Egypt to retake a large portion of this front. As another landing is made in Yemen by Ethiopia, and Yemen falls, and they have to surrender for the second time, as Oman is now getting invaded, and all of a sudden Saudi Arabia is back in the game. Socotra is retaken, and Nigeria's invasion recommences. Making Indonesia try to invade further into Australia, that was a stupid move that Russia did. Redirecting forces from here was a pretty silly move. And also the fact that the U.S. just did a blitzkrieg, basically, over here, made them take a lot of land, and Abuja is taken, which is the capital of Nigeria. So things are all of a sudden looking quite bad for the Red-Yellow Alliance, as Libya decides to unsurrender, and because there were no troops in Libya, the entire thing happened, so they realized maybe if a country surrenders, we should still occupy them, because now Tunisia is getting invaded. And the U.S. decides to retry at the Algerian desert, except that this time they just focus on getting and meeting up with their allies in the Pink Alliance. And now Nigeria is surrounded, and they see no other hope, except by surrendering. Russia has fully managed to push the U.S. out of their country, but the lasting effects of this will be very drastic, as Java is landed on, first of all. This is one thing that happens, and Indonesia, even though a majority of their population is in Java, will make the decision to retreat and hope to keep fighting. So their military, no military is lost here. They decide not even to try to defend Java. They let they're hoping by doing this also that their population won't experience fighting and that Australia will be nice in their occupation, which actually they're right about. Australia doesn't really attack the citizens there, so Indonesia made that decision. Russia doesn't like that they made that decision, but China also doesn't. But Russia and China can't really afford to lose another ally, so they just keep Indonesia in, even though they didn't like something that Indonesia did. Somehow this front line in Africa is still stalemated, And France is even being pushed back by the yellow team, and eventually the US will just fully withdraw from here because they think that if they can just starve the yellow team into submission, that's just as good as actually invading. Or they think eventually they'll be able to invade. As for this, Russia is finally resending their troops into Turkey and Egypt and retaking the territory. But Tunisia has started to be invaded, and they get cut off and actually fully taken by the Pink Alliance's troops. Meanwhile, Oman is sending troops over here and trying to liberate Yemen. They take back Socotra, and then they decide to do basically what the U.S. did. They make a landing in Ethiopia. They know it's not a strategic thing to do, and Ethiopia will easily take this back. But now Ethiopia orders the entire Pink team to focus all of their efforts on Oman. They order Saudi Arabia to be abandoned. They order Egypt to retreat to the Sinai, and for some reason those two countries actually obey those orders. And they basically tell Australia, leave Indonesia alone, and somehow Indonesia retakes Java because Australia wasn't really defending this. And let's all just, everyone just make sure Oman dies. And obviously Oman is not going to survive this. Oman is not a weak country necessarily, but there's absolutely no way they were surviving everyone attacking them. However, what Ethiopia didn't realize is that Iran can now make a landing over here and start helping. So Oman is not fully retaken. There's a little tip over here that's not. But more importantly, Russia broke through the Sinai thing that they were supposed to be holding. Italy manages to liberate Tunisia. Spain helps liberate Algeria and is now pushing back on this front, even though the U.S. should hypothetically be winning. The U.S. makes some strategic mistakes, and the Canaries are even retaken, but not the Azores. Saudi Arabia is being invaded, and it's just taken, and the Oman thing has been canceled, and as soon as it is, Oman is quote-unquote liberated by the Red Alliance, and Iran decides to switch to the Red Alliance. They're pretty much on the same side of the war, but they were given an offer. They get all their land back if they switch. And Oman is also forced to switch. So the Yellow Alliance might still be losing even though the Red Alliance is winning, as Red Alliance has now breached into Cairo, and with this, Egypt will surrender. Nigeria now decides to get back in the war, and this is a disaster for the U.S. They get a lot of their army encircled right here as Libya is being invaded, and they lose a lot of their army as Libya starts getting invaded, and Russia decides to leave Tunisia and the defense of Tunisia over to the Yellow Alliance, and the Yellow Alliance does the same thing that they were doing with these guys and changes Tunisia's allegiance. Because the Red and Yellow Alliances are still fighting together, they're not going to do anything about it, but things might get bad afterwards. With the Pink Alliance pretty much crumbling at this point, the U.S. will desperately annex whatever country this was, so that they can at least keep that in the case of a loss. Through Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia start getting invaded. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait is taken, as Ethiopia loses their whole coastline except for the southern part of it. Nigeria is starting to push back into their core territories, which were not as defended as they should have been because the U.S. had removed a lot of arms from here when Nigeria left the war. Libya is losing just as badly as they were the first time, and they surrender once again. And a combined red-yellow front is absolutely zooming down. Sudan decides to surrender at this point. Morocco has been fully liberated, and the U.S. at this point decides to just withdraw. They try to do a silent surrender strategy. They withdraw from all the territories they haven't annexed in Africa. They expect for them not to be invaded, but they were stupid in doing so, and this territory is invaded and liberated. And that might have been a pretty big blunder. The Philippines is now being invaded, finally, and they fall pretty quickly, as Australia's invasion of Indonesia is now beginning to be undone. The Red Alliance also makes a landing in Madagascar and takes it, and a landing is now made in Alaska, on the north of Alaska, not in the west, but as well as in the west, by the Russians. The Russians also, quote unquote, begin to liberate Norway, but it's also occupation, and they're not giving this land back to the Yellow Alliance. So the Yellow Alliance wants to show that they can still do it, and they start invading the U.S. And at this point, the U.S. is realizing that they are completely out of it. Like, the U.S. is out of everything. The U.S. is out of everything. They have no ability to defend anything anymore. So another landing is made in Britain, and that is liberated. And the U.S. is, like, fully out of munitions. They barely have any troops, let alone munitions. Iceland has now been taken, and it's only a matter of time before everything is taken. The governor of Alaska basically flees to the rest of the U.S. as Juneau is taken, and Canada starts to be quote-unquote liberated by the Russians. Fearing that the American occupation is just going to be switched for Russian occupation, Canadians will start to rebel, and the Americans don't really have the troops to deal with this anymore, and all of a sudden the Canadians are back, as they will start liberating portions of their country. Nova Scotia will just completely fall out of the U.S.'s hands. They just stop occupying it, and at this point the U.S. realizes they're kind of done. They retreat from Newfoundland because they realize they're probably going to lose it. As Greenland starts getting invaded, and when Nook is taken, I just give the island. Whoever has Nook has the island, is the way I see it. This northern Canadian island, the U.S. doesn't really have effective occupation of the northern Canadian islands anymore since they don't have any troops. The U.S. is, like, way past conscription. Like, they did conscription about halfway into this war, when Russia joined, maybe. Now they have so few men that are military aged in their country that it's basically, like, devastating to them. They can still, like, draw people from here, but they're not going to fight as hard. And, like, anywhere from their annexed regions, those people are not going to fight as hard. But the Yellow Alliance is liberating Canada very quickly because the U.S. is not able to, and now they start invading mainland U.S. And they take a lot of land very quickly. Again, the U.S. doesn't even have an army at this point, and it's not long before all of Canada has been liberated. And Seattle is the first American city to be taken, except that it's not because Boston was already taken, and probably a lot of other cities that I haven't noticed. New York is taken as well. All of New Jersey is taken. But the U.S. refuses to surrender. The Pink Alliance they know they're screwed, but they're still fighting, at least for now. Maybe they hope they can get a better peace settlement by fighting than by not fighting. But Gabon has been liberated. The Russians make a landing in Mozambique, and Mozambique instantly surrenders. As they start invading into South Africa and Zimbabwe, and the Yellow Alliance also starts invading into South Africa and Zambia. South Africa will surrender specifically to the Yellow Alliance, and Zimbabwe will surrender to the Red Alliance because they're the only ones who've actually invaded Zimbabwe. Zambia will surrender to the Yellow Alliance, and Uganda will do the same. And the two alliances are now competing over who can invade Ethiopia the best, and Ethiopia will finally decide to surrender. As for Australia, they will make a separate peace that actually lets them keep New Guinea, Tasmania, and New Zealand in exchange for giving up the Philippines. And with that, the Pink Alliance is gone. Argentina has silently left the war, but as they do so, they join up with Australia into a new Pink Alliance, and landings are made in the Caribbean to liberate these Caribbean islands and into Florida. Canada has now been fully liberated, with the last bit of it having just been taken. And a massive, just the entire front line is getting pushed at once into the U.S. And the U.S. still refuses to surrender for now. But once the Yucatan is invaded and Mexico is also lost, it's like the U.S. is like, fine. And the U.S. finally agrees to surrender. So let's see what this peace treaty will end up looking like. And this is the world map after the war. I'm going to let you look at it and just explain where all the colonies are. So this is a Spanish colony. This is a Russian colony, which they're going to have trouble accessing, but it is a Russian colony, which means that Tanzania is a Russian puppet. Ethiopia is split into two. They're both free states, though. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey are also all free, but obviously not completely free. They lost most of their land. The U.S. is free. Mexico is created as a free state. Panama is created as a Spanish puppet. And Brazil is liberated, and their government immediately joins the Yellow Alliance as part of their liberation. South Africa is also freed. Am I missing anything? This is a Russian colony, and this is a Chinese colony. Russia also takes some land here, and I think that's pretty much it. So all of these newly free nations are going to join the Pink Alliance. They all know that they have to be in an alliance, and with the exception of Colombia, which joins the Yellow Alliance, none of them want to be in either the Yellow or Red Alliances. They're hoping that because the Yellow and Red Alliances, they know are going to start wanting to hurt each other pretty shortly. They're hopeful that the Pink Alliance can basically be the kingmaker in that battle, and therefore they're going to be more powerful than they actually seem. Anyways, that's it for episode 9. I'll see you in episode 10. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.